All right. Well, we are live this Friday morning. Dr. Kim, how are you?
I am doing great. It's Friday weekend coming up, and yeah, and I'm ready for it. We got great weather. Cannot wait for the weekend, and it's good to be on live on Friday again. We
Yes.
haven't been in a while.
It's been a long time. Well, I am Christina Dodson, and I co host a podcast with the wonderful Dr. Kim Kimmerling. He is the marriage expert and the voice behind Awesome Marriage. And today we want to talk about communication ruts. We want to help you guys out if you happen to be in a communication rut in your marriage.
Yep.
That's awesome.
We can all get into it.
Yeah. And it's a common thing. It's a common issue with a lot of couples. So you are not alone if you feel like this is a common issue in your marriage, or if you feel like you're in a communication rut right now, we're here to help. So Dr. Kim, why do couples get in communication ruts?
I think some of it comes from frustration. I think, when we're dating, we think we're so much alike and conversation seems to go easy. And then I think once we get married, the differences come out. And sometimes we don't know how to handle those differences. So we get in a rut, or we kind of frame our spouse a certain way. Sometimes, we get complacent. I think that's another thing. I think sometimes we just don't put the effort into it that it takes to, because I think to communicate well with someone, you've got to invest in that person. You've got to, the better you know that person, the better your communication is going to be. And so if you just get complacent, that doesn't happen. I think stress affects us sometimes because we all react differently to stress. Sometimes we withdraw, sometimes we're overwhelmed, those kind of things. And I think sometimes couples just, maybe there's some things that haven't been resolved, or some issues that are there just kind of hanging, they haven't talked about. So they kind of avoid each other. And so instead of coming together and trying to figure it out, they kind of avoid. And so you get in those patterns or ruts that just aren't healthy. And sometimes we just stay there. And I think that's where it gets dangerous. We all can fall into those things. There's no doubt. But the key is, do you stay there, or do you say, hey, there's a red flag here, we got to get out?
Yeah. And I love that you use the term invest, like you stop investing. And I think you're so right. It's easy when you're dating because there's so much pursuing and investing when you're dating, or even when you're early married. But after there has been a while, I think there just comes to be a lack of intentionality is the word I feel like I would use. I find that couples, and Dylan and I included, when we get in a communication rut, it's because we stop being intentional about connecting with each other. We stop being intentional about having fun with each other. Date night is huge for this. And so if we stop being intentional about date nights, then the communication just really doesn't happen. And like you said, we're tired, we're stressed, we have a lot on our plate. And so we choose the path of least resistance, and we just veg out and scroll instead of intentional about saying, like, no, let's have fun together. Let's look each other in the eyes. Let's connect and make a rhythm of that.
Yeah, I think sometimes things are good and we just think we can coast. And I think the sooner in marriage we learn there's not coasting. And that doesn't mean it's hard work every day, but you either go forward or backwards every day in your marriage. And so if you get to where, oh man, we're communicating well, but if you don't keep having that time together and communicating, pretty soon you find yourself, we're not doing that. And it's amazing how quickly we can unconnect.
Yeah, definitely. And Allison commented down below, and she mentioned technology, which is huge. I feel like technology is a distraction. And so it distracts us. And I think so often we kind of bring our best, we bring our A game of how our energy, our A game in conversation to the world. And then we come home where we're comfortable and it's our peaceful refuge. And we just don't bring our A game to our spouse. And that's really not fair. We should bring our A game to our most important earthly relationship, which is with our spouse.
Absolutely. And I think too, when we bring our A game to our spouse and they're bringing their A game, it's easier to carry that over, and you're stronger the next day too, because you have been rejuvenated and connected with someone. And so it's really all that part of balance of A game at home first, and then A game's probably going to happen at work too, and we get it back.
Yeah, because it's going to give you life. Like, it's harder to work on the front end of things, but it's going to give you life. And it's kind of like, I saw something recently, like, you can choose your hard. Yes, it's hard to be intentional with your spouse. It's hard to make an effort there and to put in some really good rhythms. But divorce and being unconnected is also hard. So choose your hard and choose the right way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, what are some proactive things that we can do as couples to avoid communication ruts?
I think you got to talk to each other and say, and both agree that we are in one. And then once you're both, because it's kind of hard to work on something like that if you're both not on the same page with it. It's hard to work on communication when you're the only one working on it. And so I think you acknowledge it, you commit to work on it together. Okay, we're going to do better. And talk about what needs to change. The person who put in said technology, phones. What do we need? And, have we really gotten that deal like you were saying? All we're doing is chilling, we're scrolling, we're just not connecting. We're sitting side by side on the couch, but we might as well be sitting in different universes, because there's just no connection there. Trying new things together, I think, kind of a jump start. Most couples did that pretty well when they were dating. They were one person saying, well, let's do this. Another person just like, yeah, let's do that. And so sometimes we don't get that same response once we get into marriage. I think working on intimacy, and not just physical intimacy, but the things that go into connectedness, good communication, enjoying things together, having those experiences together, all of those kind of things. I think the more we connect on a day-to-day basis, the better communication is going to be, because we're going to step out of those ruts. And one thing that I think is really good is make sure there are issues there that haven't been dealt with that are keeping you from communicating well. Well, let's deal with those issues.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. And, someone brought up, what if your spouse isn't willing to communicate with you and not really up for reconciliation? And that's hard. And it kind of hits on what you just said, Dr. Kim, of, if there are other issues, you do have to solve them. And so it sounds like there might be other issues going on there. And so I would say in that scenario, if your spouse is really unwilling to communicate, counseling, I think, would be the best next step. What do you think, Dr. Kim?
Absolutely. I think if you're stuck, don't just stay there and don't get more frustrated and then or give up. And I see couples kind of do that. Well, this is the way our marriage is going to be. We do some things good together, so we'll just stay together. Now, be proactive. Go to a counselor, go to a Christian counselor, lay it out, let them help you. Because usually when someone comes in with a communication issue, sometimes we have to go deeper because there may be something behind it. But a lot of times it's just getting them back to doing some things they did before, or refining some things, or just and some accountability. One of the things that I think helps a lot in counseling is if we talk about, okay, let's do this before you come in next time, well, they got to come back and see me again. And so hopefully that motivates them to do the things that are going to help them get to where they want to be and where their marriage needs to be in communication.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another great tool is one that is new here at Awesome Marriage. We have a new tool called Questions to Help Your Spouse Open Up. And so you can find that at awesomemarriage.com under our resource tab under marriage resources. And what I love about this tool, if you really feel like your spouse is unwilling to communicate with you, I would say this is a great next step. And what I love about it is it's not like homework to pry open your spouse and like fix your spouse.
Right.
You do some work on the front end of thing. It has you journaling, it has you praying, it has you creating an environment that just helps your spouse to open up. And so I would say check out that tool if you feel like a communication rut is something that you guys are struggling with. Going back to just proactive things that we can do as couples to avoid communication ruts, I would say dating is a huge one. I think having a rhythm, whether it's twice a month or every week, where you really do have date night, whether that's at home dates or out of the house dates or a combination. But I think having that normal, natural rhythm where hey, this is date night. This is what we do on date night. We connect, we're bonding together, fun things happen on date night. They give you things to talk about so your conversation isn't stale. But I think creating rhythms like that really help. And then something else that you talk about a lot, Dr. Kim, is just those daily touch points. So having a time every day that's set, it's the same time every day where husband and wife, you're going to talk, you're going to connect, even if it's just 10 minutes. You're going to catch up on each other's lives. These rhythms will help you to be proactive about communicating.
Absolutely. Those are all so important. And we're talking about, I told somebody this week in counseling, I said, marriage isn't rocket science. It's just figuring the things that work for you and continue to do those, be intentional about them day after day. And if we do that, really things come together. And if things come up you can't deal with, then you go to counseling. But I think that definitely set aside time. One of the things I talk about a lot lately, it seems like, is listening, and how much that becomes an important part of communication. And a lot of times we don't listen well. And I think it's just because of our culture and things. There's so many distractions, and sometimes it's hard just to focus and really listen to our spouse. But that, I think, when we listen and understand our spouse, better we know our spouse, the better we're going to be able to communicate with each other.
Absolutely. That's good. I think also getting a hobby together, if you don't have a
It's a good
hobby
idea.
together, I'd say, man, find one, find something, even if it takes a ton of trial and error. What a fun thing to try out.
Yeah.
But find a hobby together because again, it just promotes a normal, natural thing to talk about. You can talk about your hobby, you can do your hobby together, and you're creating all these new opportunities for you to connect with your spouse and to have good conversation. And I'd say, ladies, be open minded about this, wives. I think, so often we just shut out all the things that we just think we're not going to like that. Guys too. But I definitely see this a lot in women where they're like, they shut out sports or they shut out video game. Well, try the video game. Some video games are actually pretty fun. Okay. So like try it before you say no, be willing to try it a couple of times. It took me a couple of years before I got into one of the sporting things that Dylan is really into, college basketball. But now I'm like, I love it. I'm here
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah, I think that's, and so I think that I was just thinking when you said that about video games, ask your husband, say, is there one of the video games that you think I would really like that we could play
Yeah.
together? Because he knows that, you may not like one that's got blood and guts in it or whatever, but
Mhm.
this one might be something that they could do fun together. So kind of let him kind of help you decide on that. And I think that's good. And I agree. Nancy was never a sports fan before we got married. And now she's a big college football fan and she's a big NBA fan. And it's because she was willing to take that step and try it. And I think what she found, and probably what you found with Dylan, when you have that in common, it's fun together. It's fun to root for the same team together. It's fun to cry together when they lose. It's fun to celebrate when they win. And it's another great way to connect you. And guys do it well with other guys, just like women do things really well with other women. But if you can do that together, I think it brings a lot of fun to your marriage.
Yeah. And I love one thing that Nancy did, which I think is good advice to ladies out there who maybe don't like sports. I know tons of women love sports, but if you're a lady who doesn't normally like sports, find out more about the players, find out their stories. I know talking to Nancy's like, oh, I follow all these NBA players on Instagram. So like, I know what their wife looks like. I know what she made for dinner. Like I see their adorable children. And so she's invested because she knows their story. And I think that can help us to get invested as well. If you're not someone who would normally enjoy sports.
I think that's such a good point, and I think because then it becomes kind of relational for a woman because and she loves following these wives and their kids and stuff like that too. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Well, Dr. Kim, what do we do if we are in a communication rut? How do we get out of it?
Yeah, I kind of hit on that a little bit. I think one, you got to commit to work on it. One thing that I think that is really important as you're working on it is to express gratitude. I think that's something that we don't do enough. And so as you're working on this together, or just even those opportunities, just day to day, if your spouse takes dinner every night and you're not saying thank you, you need to be doing that. And if your spouse does a chore for you, just express gratitude or just, I love that you're the wife that you are. I had a guy say that, oh my gosh, in counseling this week, he looked her in the eye because we had kind of a rough session. And she said, I love you. I want you to know that I would not want to be married to anyone else. I love who you are. I love the mother you are. I love the wife you are. And it was like her whole countenance change. It was amazing. It was awesome. So that I think is really good. And then I think talking about, what do you need to change? What do you need to work on together? How do you want to work on that together? One thing that's important is when you're talking about these things and you decide these things, make sure you got your game plan. You can come up with you can have a list of ideas, but if you don't act on those or decide who's going to do what, then sometimes I think it makes more frustration. We sat down and made a plan. Now 2 weeks later, we're not any better. Maybe we're worse. And so make sure you got your action plan as you go into that too.
Yeah, that is really good advice. I agree. I think some other ways to get out of communication ruts, as well as like good listening and being grateful, I think is, ask creative questions or do something different with your date night. I know we have a lot of date design, so they're kind of creative, different dates at Awesome Marriage. And again, you can find that under our resource tab. But asking each other some creative questions, really stirring up the pot, talking about something different than you normally talk about, I think is a great way to get out of a communication rut.
Yeah, I'm going to plug our resources. Our team of women have created some amazing resources. So go to awesomemarriage.com and just click on the resources deal and look at what we have there. We have so many things that will help your marriage, from how to pray, praying for your spouse, house prayer cards. We've got ways communication things, so many tools there that you're thinking, well, I want to do something, but what do I do? Well, we got some great tools for you to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so good. And just thinking about what you were saying, Dr. Kim, I love that you mentioned the gratitude piece and like being grateful. I would say a good question to maybe prayerfully ask yourself when you're alone as you're journaling is ask, how is my spouse experiencing me? Right.
Yeah.
Because communication it's a two-way street. So what is that culture around you? What is the environment around you? What vibe are you giving off to your spouse? And really prayerfully asking yourself that, because you might be coming off as ungrateful. You might be coming off as detached, or just, not paying attention and just eyes down, selfish or prideful or whatever it may be. But it's a convicting question to ask when you prayerfully go to the Lord and ask that. It's hard to hear the answer sometimes, but what the Lord will show you. But I would say, ask that. Say, God, how is my spouse experiencing me right now? And then if you're feeling real brave, ask your spouse and invite them into being being honest with you. Not brutally. You can be honest and be kind at the same time. And listen to their answer and take a moment to process that.
That's so good, because I think we've talked a lot lately about reframing, and I think that goes to how we look at our spouse. And so if I've got Nancy pegged that she's always negative about things, well, then I've got to do that. And so if she looks at herself and God reveals that to her, and then she asks me, well, then I know we're working on it. It allows me to move that frame and say, I put her in this box that she isn't in anymore. She really is not that way, and I had interpreted it wrong, or she's making some changes. And so I think all that's important. How you look at your spouse is very, very important in this whole thing, because if you've got a negative view of your spouse, we need to take care of that first.
Yeah, that is good advice. I love that. Well, it has been fun talking about communication ruts today. We have some really exciting resources coming up over the next couple of months. This summer, we're doing a whole podcast series on different episodes about communication. We also have next month a resource coming out called the 30-day communication challenge. So if you feel like communication is an issue for you, then definitely stay tuned for those awesome resources that are coming out super soon.
Yeah, thank you for being a part of Awesome Marriage and joining us today. You guys have a great weekend.
Yes, and do something awesome for your marriage today.
Absolutely.